Welcome to Coming Home, Survive and Thrive in Homeschooling. Today's episode is Keeping a Book Log and Why. Today our daughter came to show us her book log totally filled in. She was proud of it and realised the value of her log now she's grown, including a pleasant trip down memory lane. Many books can be associated with where we were at the time and what was happening in her life. It was started in 2014, so she has 8 years of her reading history in that book. There is a previously filled book she started when she began to read at a very young age. She intends to buy another book to start her next volume of her personal record of book reading. At the end of this podcast is a short interview I have done with her where she is explaining what the value to her was of a book log. But first, my reflections of keeping a book log and why. A child's book log. I suggest a handwritten record rather than using your computer or a Word doc. You won't lose it if your computer crashes. It's instant and easy access when you're at home. Obviously, as a single record, you won't be able to access it via your laptop or other. Writing it down on real paper is richer and deeper in the recorded experience of reading. The child's book log is not for textbooks that she would use, but all her other books, fiction and non-fiction. This book log is not for your read aloud books. This has another book to record in, and I will talk about that more very soon. Her book log is a record of her own handwriting development too, and the improvement. You can see what's happening as time goes by. The month and year are important to include. For mine, the year is written in for the first book of January and I jot the month in the margin. However, if your child wants to write the whole date in, that's fine, especially when they're young. They do tend to live in a more day-to-day experience rather than adults and older children who can think to the future. Another advantage of a book log is that it becomes a diary of sorts and can keep memories and activities over the years as the book is related to the time that it was read. Just going back and reading some of the titles just brings to mind fresh what was happening at the time. She can include some notes against her book record, but that's not necessary, and I suggest you don't require that of her. If your child does want to write about it, you can use your narration book for a completely different educational record. Something that a book log can come in handy for, a practical use, is you can present this for any audits or submissions required by the Education Review Office or your local authority if you need to offer proof that you're adhering to their requirements. It's a fascinating read-through for her too, looking back over the years of what she has recorded, and she will be able to see herself, her own growth, by the evidence of what she's got written on the paper in front of her. It's especially good if she's feeling inadequate or needs her tyres pumped up a little bit. Either way, she's going to feel proud of herself when she sees how much she's read as time goes by. For you, it's a reassurance of her learning ability. It's a reminder if you need to check if she's read a book. And it's so darn cute. Just looking back at that sweet little handwriting and those cute little books they read when they were young, and you've watched them grow up just simply by the record of what they're written. You can include audiobooks in her book log, but use an asterisk to indicate the difference between a real book and a recorded one. If she finds it difficult to read, it's heartening for her to be able to include an audiobook in her record. However, the ability to read fluently is an essential life skill necessary for the rest of her life, so be sure to work hard on this if reading is a natural struggle for her. You'll be doing her no favours at all if you allow her to choose the easy road for reading. This is one homeschool principle of going with what their interests are and what she is good at just doesn't apply. I'll deal with reading difficulties in a separate podcast. The aforementioned Read Aloud book log is a separate book. There won't be as many books in this one, but it's still worth the keeping for all of the previously mentioned reasons. Perhaps rather than a thicker lined book, choose a smaller journal-type book, a pretty one with a nice cover, with lovely paper. The difference is, in your read aloud books, these are the books that everyone listened to in your family. We did write in a small review or narration after each one. Even if the kids didn't actually enjoy the book, it's important to get the truth recorded rather than what they think ought to be said. And they took turns in writing or having their oral narration written in by me if they were too young to write adequately. And perhaps if they're little, they might like to include a drawing. Now, moving on to your book log. Yes, keep your own record of what you read. You don't need to comment on the books, only what you think is pertinent for later reference. Write in all your books, fiction and non-fiction, including your career development books on homeschooling, parenting, and any other self-help book you read. In my book log, I included some cookbooks and knitting books, as I would enjoy reading them as any other book. Even if I didn't cook the recipes or knit the projects in the book, I still enjoy this as a reading book, therefore it goes in my reading log. Include your audiobooks. These days, my knitting time is important to me, more important to me than what it used to be, and I'd rather use audiobooks so I can knit at the same time. Articles, even long, tedious ones, are not books, but a PhD dissertation would be. I regularly look back in my book log. It brings me warm, fuzzy feelings, or endorphins if you like, and there are times when this is what I need, and I'm sure you do too. If you do reread a book, write it down again. In my book log, you will find the darling buds of May make a regular appearance over the years. And now we're going to hear from Janie on her reflections of what a book log has meant to her. Janie, can you please tell me why you think keeping a book log is a good idea? You did it as a child because you were required to, but as an adult now you still choose to do it. Can you please reflect?
Well, I kept going with it when I was a teenager because I've always liked making lists, but I like to record what I've been reading so that I can look back on it over time. I can go back and see what books that I've read multiple times, and I can see how my thoughts have changed on subjects, or whether or not they have changed at all, or what new things I got out of it. After I finish reading a book, I write down the same thing every time. I write down the author, the title, the date that I finished reading it, not the date that I started. Because if I wrote down both, sometimes I feel kind of bad about myself that it took such a long time to read. The date that I finished it, and how many times that I read it. And then I write like a little blurb about my thoughts, and that can be something as short as good read, very interesting, which means it probably wasn't that interesting because I didn't really have any thoughts on it, or something very long and lengthy if it's impacted me quite a lot. But that's my favourite part because I can go back through my mind of all the thoughts that occurred to me as I was reading this book, and I can put them on paper, and I find that my ideas and my thoughts become clearer when I write them down. And so it's actually really cool because I can just sort of sort out all my ideas at once, and I don't know, it just helps me to think more deeply and feel like conclusive, I guess. Yeah. Otherwise they disappear as well. They just go.
Your thoughts?
Yeah. That's why I do it as soon as I finish the book as well. Otherwise I forget what my opinions were. But if I write it down, then I won't forget.
Have you gone back over what you read and wrote when you were younger, and has your mind grown or changed since then?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of my more naive opinions have changed about certain things that I thought were like good in a book. Now I realise that weren't good, or some of my worldview opinions have changed as well. Things that maybe I disagreed with back then, I now am more open-minded about. And that's kind of interesting to look at as well, how I've kind of grown up. And because my mind was younger, less experienced, I guess I would have pulled different things out of the stories compared to how I would now.
Tell me a bit then about when you have read a book when you were younger, you've written about it, and then you've chosen to read it now that you're a bit older, and then you've rewritten something about it. What was your development and growth about it? I know that's very close to what you've just said, but there's a little bit of something extra.
Well, I'm trying to think of a specific one, like Lord of the Rings or something.
Go with that. That's a good one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think some of my favourite parts of the book would have changed. Like, some of my favourite parts were like, oh, I loved the description of the Balrog or something, and maybe that would have changed. Now my favourite part, something even deeper about a different part that I thought was boring at the time. But now I'm like, oh, that's actually very insightful. And, yeah, I like that quote more. It's also very satisfying. I get a sense of achievement out of it. When I'm like, yes, I finished my book. Now I can write it in my book log. And it's like this list that keeps growing, and I can look back on it and I can feel like it's little achievements like that, which I feel kind of proud of myself about. Like, look at all these tomes. Look at all these short stories or whatever. You know, it makes me feel like I'm smarter. Yeah, it's something tangible I can look back on, and even if it's a little thing.
Well, it underscores the fact that it's not just the feeling. You are smarter, and what your record of in the book log proves it, if you like, and there must be days when that's valuable to you. This morning when you came out and showed us your book log, you had the look on your face that I can see just now. Your eyes are sparkling, you're glowing. It's obviously bringing you happiness, which is why we thought, wow, it'd be a really good idea just to record this, because other homeschool parents are going to listen to this and go, that's why, because when my child is older, she too will more than likely have the same response.
Yeah, it's fun. It's like a personal project. You've got all to yourself and you're achieving it yourself, and you can feel proud of it. I like it.
Yeah, that's actually a good word, a personal project. Yeah. I feel the richness of why we did book blogs, I didn't even understand at the time, all those years ago. Well, thank you, love. That's a really, really helpful thing to have.
I just feel like, in general, it's cool to reflect on creative things that you've observed or taken in or consumed. And that can even include movies, artworks, or, I might sound controversial, video games. A lot of the time you can get a lot of creative insights out of, and good life advice. I like reflecting on art. A book log helps me do that.
I wonder if keeping the reflections on your books has helped you extend that. It's rippled out into other areas.
In general, it helps you see the world a different way. I think that's important.
Thanks for those insights, Jane. Really appreciate it.